There is no question that something is here, lurking, somewhere in the darkened corners. But how will we ever find out what it is? We need to look, always, and never stop. No matter what stands in our way. No matter what others may think. Explore the darkness. Shine light into it. Join the red strings and the silver threads. Everything is connected. Somehow. I am Mark L. Watson. This is Peer Beyond the Veil.
It's good to get out in the field because despite what most of these television programs, many of which I've been on until I talked about it, and then they don't invite me anymore, you really have to do something comparable to Hellier because they got out there and followed what will we call them? The synchronicities is the term they used, and I think that will do just fine. And they didn't reach some endpoint. And that's the way field research goes. If you follow the synchronicities, from my experience, really weird things happen. And the more you follow them and don't follow your intuition per se, the more those things tend to happen. And is there some end point? I haven't found one. But somewhere along the line, you begin to get a clue. Now, if you do academic research, like the SPR or whoever, you're likely to have a lot of statistical anomalies, but nothing, Dean Radin, to the contrary, nothing that you can say, this is it, Eureka, I have found it. Because this is a little bit like chaos theory, really.
In our world of the paranormal, the strange, the weird, the extraterrestrial, the ultra-terrestrial, and the occult, we search, individually and as a whole, for answers. Researchers come and go. Some of the stalwarts hang on, their work cited and referenced, changed, adapted, evolving as the studies go on, and as more evidence is presented. Sometimes we feel like we've made a breakthrough, that we're standing on the doorstep of a change, an understanding, a new paradigm of knowledge that will bring us that inch closer to the truth. And sometimes we feel like we've never been further from it. We join the dots, and frequently it's acknowledged that all things we research are indeed linked in some manner. We associate ghosts and spirits with occult practice, the occult with extraterrestrials. Keenians will associate it all with the ultra-terrestrials, and then all manner of cryptids of the world tie in too. Nowhere better, certainly in the past decade, but surely more, has the wide spectrum of supernatural phenomena of this world been tied together with more clarity than in the documentary series Hellier. What can only be described as a breakthrough moment in the history of research into these things, it ties an encounter with an entity that goes back to the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter of 1955, if not further, to virtually every other aspect of the paranormal that we know. But through it all, there is one binding factor. We follow the Hellier team across the western United States, searching for new avenues to pursue and trying to dig up some old ones, even trying to find Indrid Cold's old home. But wherever we walk, we see that all roads lead to Greenfield. Occultist and long-time author Allen H. Greenfield has been one of the key players in the field for many decades. His first published work was the introduction of Silver Bridge by the great Gray Barker, an old friend, colleague, and drinking partner of Greenfield's, and somebody of whom many great stories can, and will, be told. His work, The Secret Cipher of the Ufonauts, which forms the basis for the treasure hunt that is Hellier, underpins our very existence with all manner of strange beings from this world and others, and has served to many as a go-to reference point for confirming the synchronicities encountered throughout their research. A past member of the Society For Psychical Research and the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, and twice voted Ufologist of the Year at the National UFO Conference, Allen joins us tonight to explain how he has dedicated his life to trying to peer beyond the veil.
I think that the universe has an underlying wholeness about it. And things that we take to be coincidental, they are coinciding, but there's always some underlying meaning, just like you find in chaos theory, the Fibonacci sequence and fractals and so forth are just everywhere to be seen, from galaxies to butterflies. And therefore, I think there are guiding synchronicities, and you think you got it all figured out, and suddenly you get a phone call that you didn't expect from your Aunt Agatha, who you haven't talked to in years, but you did say her name just yesterday for no reason at all. Aunt Agatha. Well, it could be, if you believe that there are coincidences, it could be that she happened to call just at that time, but the likelihood is low, and the significance is probably, if you keep a diary of synchronicities, you'll find that they happen, if you're into probability theory at all, it happens more often than chance, just on unimportant, insignificant things, not the classical and perhaps telepathic. You suddenly get a feeling that you're worried about your cousin Bill, and you find out at that moment, you look at the clock, at that moment, your cousin Bill was in a near fatal car wreck. I mean, these stories are so standardized that I just take it for granted that they work out, that they have a significance. The difference is that if you follow the synchronicities, I give you a personal example. I have been following the works of the late great Philip K. Dick since the 1950s. And every time, this did not happen back then when I was but a wee bairn type creature. I found that when I was mostly rereading stuff that I'd already read, if I put it down, some kind of synchronicity would happen. I'd turn on the telly, and the telly would say, and this was based on a book by Philip K. Dick. And it isn't necessarily the book that I was looking at, but it happened so many times. I would say it still happens. Probably it'll happen today, 100% of the time from some point on, I guess circa 1983, 84, 85, somewhere in there. And it happens so often that, not being a meticulous person, I haven't kept a diary of, oh, today Philip K. Dick showed up. And the more famous he gets, ironically, the more likely it is that something of that sort will occur. But when it started to happen, nobody knew who he was outside of hardcore science fiction circles, and apparently a few people in Hollywood who deemed it really appropriate to do something about it. And they do. So that is, to me, that is clearly an intended synchronicity.
Yeah, where I'm a little conflicted, if conflicted's the word, on the synchronicity versus coincidence discussion is, let me give you an example. I was chatting quite recently with Gary Vasey, who's on an episode of this show, and he also does a podcast, and he'd been speaking on his show with Anthony Peake, and the two of them had been discussing the synchronicities that they'd both been experiencing, which loop back into Hellier, and they loop into Pan and the Horned God, and some of the research that both Gary and Anthony have been doing. And so Anthony appeared on Gary's show, and they talked extensively about synchronicities. He put that out just a little while back, and I listened to it whilst experiencing similar synchronicities, if you can term it that. And that was the same day that I heard back from yourself about your appearance on here, which also links back into Hellier and Pan. And so you kind of have synchronicities piled up there, but at the same time, we're all in this world, we're all having similar discussions at the same time. Hellier is everywhere, everybody's fascinated by it. It covers so many different phenomena that it ties into many of the things that we're all researching, and as I say, we're all discussing them at the same time. So is it synchronicity that all those events line up, or is it just a matter that we're all talking about the same thing, so it's only a matter of time till we talk about them at the same time?
If I'm correct, and there are no coincidences, there's only synchronicity, maybe that's a low-level synchronicity. But so it alerted you to let's look at it as a synchronicity and assume that it is an artifact of being part of a somewhat incestuous community of people that are interested in the unknown or paranormal research or flying saucer, whatever aspect. I think they're all the same thing, but that's my particular take on things. If it was only something that you took that got your attention, and you conclude from that some synchronicities are because of material interactions between people, that is a useful synchronicity.
So just moving on, kind of on and off at the same time. Last night was the opening of the Lion's Gate. I was wondering if you could just explain a little about it and how that's relevant to our conversation, or to yourself, and how that ties into obviously your work, the Golden Dawn. And
I have always thought that what is taken to be magical ritual or occult ritual and the manifestations of various things, from Nessie to the abominable snowman, the Sasquatch, and the little people fairy lore, which some people think is confined to Ireland on days when people are very, very inebriated. It's not. It's a worldwide thing, and it's very common in this country, which is sort of how Hellier got started. They went out looking for goblins and wound up finding everything from a cult, probably some kind of sex death cult, but they didn't get close enough to know. I said, how do you go to these places unarmed? Are you insane? But that seemed to be one of the things that they happened upon. I think the Pan ritual missed what I was trying to communicate. Not that they have to follow, what I say. As far as I'm concerned, they could go somewhere else altogether. But what I meant was that their entire process, season 1 and what was then developing into season 2, was a ritual. I based that on my friend Amadali, the trance dancer who came over here from London, I believe, to do her performance for a group of people at a convention that we did, and said, everyone who witnesses my trance dancing becomes a co-participant in it. And indeed, that is the case, at least that is insofar as I can tell. I think the same thing, applies to if you go out and follow the synchronicities that you find, whatever direction they twist and turn in, you're going to find, for lack of a better term, interesting stuff. And you can evaluate it later, but if you just go with it, you go with it. But I never meant, in your ultimate episode for the season, do an invocation of Pan. I read the hymn to the Star Goddess, and this guy, I remember his name is Ken King, in our early days of the Great Mount Arabia working, which was then more of a following the Carlos Castaneda stuff. I did a pretty good job. I'm a pretty good orator. But this guy read the hymn to Pan, and the Star Goddess went wandering off into the bushes because the hymn to Pan was so powerful, everybody in the room was just silent. We went out to the mountain. Something opened up and something came through. And that's where we get back to exactly what you were asking. I think that almost all of these things, Richard Shaver's Diro, the guy Terry, who I knew for like a year and get asked about all the time, I think what they were doing, I thought it at the time, they go into the mouth of caves, and they're not going deep into the earth. That's really not doable. I mean, not really deep, as you melt in the magma. What you're doing is you're finding certain conditions which create portals. And if you open that portal, you're going to a very weird place. There are other worlds right here in this room and right there in your room, and it's always there. But what magicians are doing when they do, let's say, an Enochian ritual is open up another dimension. And I think that's what the Lion's Gate is as well. The thing that worries me a little bit is Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons seem to have opened a portal in the California desert near the border of Arizona, which is where I went to graduate school, so I know the turf real well. I don't see any record of their having closed it. They got some really, really useful information. And it has been said repeatedly, a door opened and something came through. And that, according to the lore anyway, is the beginning of the modern UFO era. Of course, I think that the flaw in that logic is I think all of these phenomena go back as far as we do, if not further. So it may be their portal is still open. I've often threatened to go to Pasadena and close it down, but it's a long trip. I think that the phenomena has been around as long as humans and possibly as long as the planet, if not longer. I stopped doing this, what I would call ecclesiastical occultism, some time ago because I got tired of having religious dogma stuck on something that I simply don't buy into. I mean, for all of my weirdness, I have the most uninteresting religious views that you could possibly have. I'm a lifelong follower of Reform Judaism, which is minimal on the miraculous and maximal on social justice. I mean, that's not a fair, complete description, but that's where we are. And so when I see something like transubstantiation in the Christian Mass, which has been adapted by the Crowleyites in the Gnostic Mass, which I know, alas, all too well. It's the notion that you take a substance and imbue it with egregore. Only the select can imbue it, the priest or the bishop. And if you partake of that, you are eating the flesh of the god, whatever that God happens to be. That seems a lot like human sacrifice, which Crowley, not my favorite person, but he once said in one of his many lawsuit interviews, he was asked if he believed in human sacrifice. And he said one of those rare good things that he ever said. He said, "Yes, I believe it works. It's efficacious, and I'm totally opposed to it." I
And
think of him as the court jester of occultism, but those who take him seriously are many, and some are thoughtful people, but most are idiots.
he had a part to play in the early days of it, with
Yes. And we should gently put that to rest and say, you know, he wanted that in his own list of saints. He occupied two places. So he really wanted to be in the list. I'm willing to give him one place in the list of those who carried the gnosis forward to their successors and their heirs. You know, but why make a big deal out of it? He died in poverty as a drug addict, and his last words supposedly were, "I am perplexed." There you go. That is the sum of this life of exploration. So he joins the angels.
I don't want to keep going back on, onto Hellier too much. Obviously, you're quizzed on Hellier so much, I'm sure. I've heard you.
Oh, yes, but it's been very good for a very old book, which is now selling much more than it did when it
Yeah.
first came out. And people are
Published.
doing what I thought they would do back then. They're actually working with secret Cipher of the Ufonauts,
Yeah.
which caused me difficulties to know in because of the version that's out now. The complete secret cipher has two books in it, which was what I intended to do. I originally wanted it to be a trilogy. The people read it. I mean, it's sold out in the original edition. Then the publisher mysteriously was either murdered or not. I don't know. A lot of funny things happened that brought Illuminate Press down. The best thing that I can say is people are now working with the cipher in the way that I intended. I intended for it to be a tool for people to carry on the work way beyond where I'm coming from. So, and beyond my lifetime. And the fact that it didn't happen until Hellier, that's, for me, that's the best thing that I can say about Hellier. I mean, people are actually working with the cipher. It doesn't hurt that it's also selling a lot of books.
Our world of the paranormal, whatever that world is, plays host to all manner of strange and weird and wonderful creatures. Look back through time and across all the cultures of the world, and there are quite literally thousands of them. They range from the most bizarre of cryptozoological creatures, sea monsters, thunderbirds, harpies and kelpies and bigfoots. We have extensive history of fairy encounters, extraterrestrials of all shapes and sizes and descriptions, and the entities and spirits who exist in the netherworld, beyond, mostly, our line of sight. You would be pushed to find somebody who believed that all these things are real, in any sense of the word, but then you would also be pushed to find someone who does not believe at least a little in some aspect of it. So many of the things we discuss and research and read books about cross over with others. Classic fairy lore and their kind, the elves and sprites and pixies, have them as mischievous folk who move things around your home, tricksters, even when you can't see them. Poltergeists, maybe? Hunters and trekkers have spotted and chased down huge bipedal creatures in environments around the world, the Sasquatch, the Yeti, the Orang Pendek, but seen them vanish into the ether in front of them. Spirits, maybe? These things, all or some of them, are claimed to exist in other dimensions that seemingly exist alongside our own, phasing in and out for reasons yet truly unknown. Is that dimension purely one within our own minds? A place where we, either through our own doing or through some external influence, manifest these things? Not to say that they aren't real in some sense, not purely fabrications of our own minds, but rather that our own minds are the only place where we can see them. Or is there more to it? Einstein theorized that there are 4 dimensions, even though we can only see 3, and he guessed there may be as many as 11. So what is the great connection between these things? Is there a unifying theory to it all?
They're all taken to be connected to some kind of otherwhere, whether it's extraterrestrial space, which puzzles me a lot because they're never seen in coming to Earth, they're seen on the Earth. They have that persistence through history. They remain, all of them, they remain just beyond the horizon. They seem to be sort of like mirages in that no matter how close you get, they're still further down the road. People give up on them. People will find that they interact, like the little beings that came out of UFOs, the so-called little green men, are very little different, if at all, from the entire corpus of fairy lore. In fact, the societies that investigate these things even adapt the names. There's a Loch Ness Phenomena Investigation Bureau. That's a take from ufology. I mean, that people have been seeing the Loch Ness Monster since the early 20th century at least, and probably longer than that. But using that kind of name and that kind of research method indicates that you're dealing with another version of the same phenomena. And beyond that, am I putting you to sleep? Beyond that, I think that if you take into account any kind of version of the alternate membrane theory, if that is correct, let's assume that it is, we are not any distance whatsoever from worlds that may be vastly different from our own. Why should they not interact? Our senses, our 5 senses, are really not built for anything too sophisticated. We just came down from the trees a moment ago in biological time. In geological time, we're still in the trees, and in cosmological time, I don't know, there's not even a second. So the notion that we've developed these senses for anything other than mating, running away from predators, being predators ourselves, we only have a couple of thousand years, which is nothing in terms of evolution, to use these senses to divine what a little green man really is, or what a Yeti really is, or what Bigfoot really is, stupid names, or what the Loch Ness Monster really is. So we come up with these somewhat speculative notions about them. Anyway, so I kept seeing a cat on the bag, the only bag on the ground. It was not a, slummy area. It was just dark. And as I approached it, I could see there was no cat on it. And I was, when you take long walks in the middle of the night, you do a lot of mentation. And I thought, aha, this is the sort of thing that happens. You create a cat or something. It could have been a dog. It could have been a raccoon, something. I mean, this is, near a national forest. And since it's a white bag, it would look like a white cat laying on the bag until you get close enough to resolve it with your, as normal a vision as I have. And I'm glad you get my sense of humor. I hope your audience does. They'll be returning
my. See what I'm looking at this entire time. I'll have to explain.
They'll be returning it, the book, in droves to Amazon or Amazon UK or whoever they get it from. But if you return it, you don't get anything back, and it will be on the used book market for $462 or something. See a moth, man? Or did you see a moth, man?
I can see a moth, man. Right here.
Well, in any case, so I kept seeing that, and I wondered idly, of course, not wanting to do anything myself, because why wasn't the bag picked up? Well, it was in an alley. It was the only bag there. And I must have gone by it, I was going to say 1,000 times, but that would be a lot. Several hundred times. And there was nothing on the bag, but I would frequently see the cat in the bag. Then I walked by it, and I thought, there's the hallucination again. And I walked up, and there was a white cat on that bag who saw me and then got off the bag and ran off. Now, what are the odds? I mean, I can't even calculate all of the variables involved there. Could have been a dog, could have been nothing, I could have gone 1,000 times and there would still be nothing on the bag. So that reminded me immediately of that scene in the Matrix.
You tulpaed yourself a cat.
Either I created the tulpa and it was manifesting no matter how close I got, although it did run away, but it ran away like a normal cat. I never saw it again. There were other cats in the neighborhood. They were all black. It was a black cat. I would go way around not to have them cross my path. Sometimes I would chase them to beat them out. But a white cat? No. It was a totally unlikely experience that I attribute to something that tulpa is as good a term as you're going to get. And did I create it? I don't know. Or was it just a glitch in the fabric of what we take to be reality? Perhaps. I don't know. But have I in some way gotten around to answering your question about the nature of reality? Because I'll just get back to existence becoming existence.
Yeah, I mean, have you answered it? Will you ever? I don't mean will you ever. Will we ever? Will we ever answer it? I mean,
yes, it will be in my new book, Existence, by Allen Greenfield.
The point is, we don't know. I just think there's so many crossovers between them.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've even seen cases where one phenomena morphs into another. Clearly, and they're not the most common cases, but I think they're the most revealing, where a UFO morphs into, there's a case from the 1950s where a family is riding on, I don't know whether this was before the Audubon type roads were built. We'll say it was on US 1, going towards Miami, and they see a cylindrical UFO very near the ground. In this story, the UFO doesn't go away, it just hovers, and it lowers something that looks like an elevator. And out of it, and this will date it, are a series of Ford Galaxy, which was the name of a model car, and with a man in black clothing behind the wheel of each car as it came down, and they drove off. So what are we dealing here with? We're dealing with a UFO. We're dealing with men in black, and we're dealing with ghost cars, which also have a lot of circulation in this lore. Now, do I believe that that happened as literally as the recipients claim? No, I do not. But something was the stimulus for this response. And it's the same sort of thing that John Keel was encountering on Long Island. Keel is a whole different subject. His West Virginia stories are a little shakier because my old friend Gray Barker was hoaxing him here and there, as Gray was wont to do. The calls from Indrid Cold were not Indrid Cold, they were Gray the Barker.
That's right, Mr. Keel.
Yeah, the same as God, but it was Barker. And Gray and Jim Moseley would get together and they'd get stoned and uproariously drunk, and they'd do some kind of prank. But I also say there are no hoaxes, because Jim Moseley, and I have Gene Steinberg, one of my fellow teen ufologists grown old, are in Jim's New York apartment. And Jim, Steinberg doesn't drink. Jim gets uproariously drunk, as he was wont to do. I love the man, but I don't think he ever drew a sober breath, and he lit one cigarette off of another, and he lived into his 80s, defying all of my health food pretense. But in any case, he decides he's going to create a hoax at an arbitrary town by calling the local police department and telling them that there was a UFO in the vicinity. So he spent a lot of years in New Jersey before he retired to Key West, where he was my neighbor. So he picks out of nowhere the Wanacue, New Jersey Police Department. And he knows the area, so he says, "There's a flying saucer over the reservoir there." Made up. Story completely made up. That was the beginning of the Wanacue Flap. It was a major series of good UFO sightings that persisted for some days. It doesn't get called a flap because somebody makes a phone call. It gets called a flap because lots of UFOs are seen by cops and by real people and, whatever. That put me in mind of the notion that the investigators become part of the phenomena. One of the little Greenfield sayings that I use, and B, that hoaxes tend to take on a life of their own because reality, as we understand it, we being not the royal we, the collective we, is malleable, is somewhat more plastic than we give it credit for. That's why magic works. That's why these apparitions appear to some extent according to our advanced expectations, even if there are multiple witnesses, whether it's a ghost or whether it's a little man from outer space, or whether it's an abduction experience or any of that. Even near-death experiences fall into that category. And the abduction experiences and near-death experiences are so close, one must say it's only the circumstance under which they occur that separate the two, and they're the same phenomenon. Doesn't mean it's not real, doesn't mean it's not valid. What it means is one validates the other, and they're basically the same thing. So, there you have it. No hoaxes. If you do a hoax and it makes it into public consciousness, which some hoaxes don't, the hoax takes on a life of its own, and there again, it's something that becomes Crowley in his secret teachings would say, was bud will, the creation through sexual magic of a temporary being that can do your will. I'm not into the notion of triumph of the will. It has negative connotations for some of us, but I do think that we do, to a large extent, create the reality that we're living in. So this has been ecstatic. You ask the right questions, and sometimes I give the right answers.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And all the best.
Same for you. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Take care. Peer Beyond the Veil has been written and presented by myself, Mark Watson. Music and soundtracks accredited and licensed to Purple Planet and to Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons. All rights are reserved by our parent company, MLW Publishing. You can follow us at facebook.com/Peer Beyond the Veil, or on Twitter at Peer Beyond the Veil or at Peer Beyond 2020. Please click the like and subscribe buttons when you see them, most importantly wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps us to attract the attention we need to keep the show going, to get the guests that you all want to hear from, and to help more and more people peer beyond the veil.